The long banquet table remained empty. Just me sitting there. Congratulations on your promotion balloons drifted lifelessly under the ceiling fan, while everyone I'd trusted was cheering next door for the man who'd turned my career into a nightmare. That night, I wasn't just abandoned, I realized I'd been collectively betrayed. And right then, I decided they would pay. My name is Elena Carter, and at 34, I'd spent the last decade of my life dedicated to material science at Brightcore Innovations. The PhD hanging on my office wall wasn't just a piece of paper, it represented countless nights in the lab, thousands of failed experiments, and the relentless pursuit of breakthroughs that could change industries. When Richard Hale, my direct supervisor, called me into his office last Monday to announce my promotion to senior project developer, I thought I'd finally made it. "We should celebrate," he'd said, that practiced smile stretching across his face. "Friday night, 7:30, Marcello's downtown. Invite everyone from the team. This is big. Elena." I should have noticed how his eyes never quite met mine. Seated alone at a long table meant for 20, I watched the elaborate ice sculptures slowly collapse into shapeless pools. The waitstaff hovered nearby, topping off my water glass with looks that felt almost sympathetic. 7:30 slipped into 8:30, then 9. My phone kept lighting up with one explanation after another: unexpected illness, last-minute family matters, car issues. The timing of it all felt far too convenient, too carefully aligned. Through the restaurant's floor-to-ceiling windows, I could see the glow from Havana Lounge across the street. My hands trembled as I pulled up Instagram. There it was, Maya Torres's story, posted 12 minutes ago, the entire department crammed into frame, champagne glasses raised high, and at the center, Derek Lawson, grinning like a king holding court. The caption read, "Celebrating Derek's well-deserved retirement and of an era." Retirement. Derek was 41. My stomach churned as I scrolled through more stories. Richard's arm around Derek's shoulders, the lab technicians I'd mentored, even Sandra from accounting, who I'd helped through her divorce last year. Every single person who'd RSVP'd yes to my promotion dinner was there, toasting the man who'd spent the last 3 years undermining my research, cutting corners on safety protocols, and taking credit for other people's innovations. The worst part wasn't the betrayal itself, it was the choreography of it. This wasn't spontaneous. This was planned, coordinated, executed with the precision of a hostile takeover. They'd all received their real invitation, the one that mattered, while mine was just a decoy to keep me out of the way. I stood up slowly, leaving $300 on the table, enough to cover the reservation fee and the waitstaff's wasted evening. My heels clicked against the marble floor, each step echoing in the nearly empty restaurant. The hostess offered a sympathetic smile as I passed. She'd seen this before. Perhaps the corporate world's special brand of cruelty. Outside, the October air bit through my dress. I could hear the laughter from across the street, Derek's booming voice carrying over the traffic. Part of me wanted to storm in there, demand answers, make a scene. But I knew better. In that room full of cowards and opportunists, I'd only be giving them more ammunition, more reason to justify whatever sick game they were playing. My phone vibrated again, another Instagram notification. This time, a group photo with a telling detail: my research files spread across the table in the background, the distinctive blue folders I'd organized just yesterday. They weren't just celebrating Derek. They were dividing up my work, my innovations, my future. The promotion wasn't real. It never had been. It was just another move in a game I hadn't even known I was playing. The parking garage elevator had just closed when my phone exploded with notifications. 17 missed calls from HR, 3 from the CEO's office, a dozen text messages marked urgent. My hands were still shaking from anger when I answered the 18th call. "Elena, thank God." Jennifer from HR sounded like she'd been running. "Where are you? We need you at the office immediately." "It's 9:45 on a Friday night. Jennifer, I'm going home." "Please, Elena, we're facing a catastrophe. The Titan X project, Derek's new composite formula, it's failing. The entire production line is compromised. We could lose everything." I felt the words settle in my chest like ice. Titan X was Derek's baby. The project he'd fast-tracked over my stability warnings. The one Richard had called the future of the company when he'd diverted my funding to support it 3 months ago. The samples are disintegrating, Jennifer continued, her voice cracking. The molecular bonds are breaking down exactly like you predicted in your report, the one that got buried. So they knew. They'd all known my analysis was right, and they'd buried it anyway. We have journalists coming Monday morning. Investors are flying in from Tokyo. If we can't fix this— You mean if I can't fix this? Silence. Then, barely a whisper. The board knows you have the stable formula. The one Derek said was too conservative, too slow. We need it. Elena, the company needs it. I sat in my car, engine off, listening to the parking garage's fluorescent lights buzz. Through my windshield, I could see the Brightcore building, its glass facade reflecting the city lights. 14 years of my life in that building. 14 years of believing that good work would speak for itself. Elena, are you there? Send me the failure data, I heard myself say. All of it. The files came through before I'd even ended the call. Temperature readings, stress test results, molecular imaging, everything screaming what I'd warned them about months ago. Derek's formula was elegant on paper, seductive in its promises of revolutionary performance. But chemistry doesn't care about marketing deadlines or quarterly reports. It follows rules that can't be rushed or charmed or politicked away. My phone buzzed with another text, this time from Richard. Elena, I know tonight didn't go as planned. Derek's retirement was a last-minute thing. Please come to the office. We need your expertise. This is your chance to prove yourself. The audacity of it made me laugh sharp and bitter in the empty garage. They'd orchestrated my humiliation, divided up my research like vultures over carrion, and now they wanted me to save them. The same stable formula they'd mocked as overcautious and lacking vision was suddenly their lifeline. Another message from an unknown number. Ms. Carter, this is David Brennan from the board. I'm authorizing triple overtime and any resources you need. Name your price. Name my price. As if this was about money. As if they could buy their way out of the fundamental laws of chemistry they'd chosen to ignore. I started my car, but instead of driving home, I found myself heading toward the office, not because they deserved saving, but because I needed to see it for myself, the magnitude of their failure, the price of choosing shortcuts over science. The security guard's eyes widened when he saw me. Ms. Carter, they're all waiting for you in the crisis room. All of them. The same people who'd stood me up tonight, now desperate for the expertise they'd dismissed. The poetry of it was almost beautiful. The rain started as I crossed the parking lot. Heavy drops that turned into sheets by the time I reached the entrance. I was soaked within seconds. My promotion dinner dress clinging to me like a second skin of humiliation. The security cameras would capture this moment. Elena Carter, arriving like a drowned rat to save the company that had just betrayed her. The crisis room was on the 40th floor, usually reserved for board meetings and hostile takeovers. Tonight, it looked like a war room. Laptops everywhere, coffee cups forming rings on the mahogany table, and faces drained of color under the harsh fluorescence. They all turned when I walked in, water still dripping from my hair. Richard stood first, his earlier smugness replaced with desperation. Elena, thank God, we've pulled all the data from the production line. The deterioration is accelerating. I moved to the screens without acknowledging him. The molecular models were collapsing in real time, bonds breaking in a cascade failure I'd documented 6 months ago. My original report had been comprehensive 47 pages of analysis, predictive models, alternative solutions, all of it dismissed as unnecessarily pessimistic. Where are my research files? I asked the room. They've been archived, someone mumbled. Archived, I let the word hang. You mean deleted from the main servers? I need access to the backup system. Jennifer's fingers flew across her laptop. I'm trying, but your credentials were adjusted when Derek took over the project. Of course they were. I pulled out my phone, connected it to the main screen. The room gasped collectively as my personal cloud storage opened every experiment, every trial, every warning I'd issued, meticulously documented and time-stamped. You kept copies? Richard's voice cracked. I learned long ago that in this company, covering your ass isn't paranoia, it's survival. The stable formula was there, complete with implementation protocols, but as I scrolled through, Something else became clear. The metadata showed multiple unauthorized access attempts over the past 3 months. Derek hadn't just dismissed my work, he'd been trying to steal it, planning to present my solution as his own once his formula inevitably failed. "This can work," David Brennan leaned forward, relief flooding his face. "We can implement this before Monday." "No," I said quietly. "We can't." The room erupted, voices overlapping, panic rising. I waited until they exhausted themselves. "The implementation requires specific temperature controls during synthesis. The equipment was recalibrated for Derek's process. It'll take 36 hours minimum to reset and test." I pulled up the specifications. "Unless, of course, you want to risk another failure. Maybe this time with journalists watching." Richard grabbed my arm. "Elena, please, you don't understand what's at stake." I looked down at his hand until he released me. "I understand perfectly. You bet the company's reputation on a formula you knew was flawed because Derek promised faster results. You buried my research because it didn't fit your timeline. And now you want me to perform miracles." "We'll give you anything," Brennan interjected. "Full credit, bonus, permanent position on the development board." "I don't want your bribes." I began uploading the stabilization protocols to the main system. "I'm going to fix this because unlike everyone in this room, I actually care about the science, about the people who could be hurt if this product fails in the field." For the next 6 hours, I worked. They watched like vultures, occasionally offering help I didn't need or want. At 3:20 in the morning, Maya arrived, mascara smudged, champagne still on her breath. Our eyes met across the room. She opened her mouth, closed it, turned away. By 4:45, the solution was processing. The molecular bonds held. The stress tests passed. I'd saved them, again. "The formula will be stable by Monday morning," I announced, gathering my things. "The documentation is in the system. Any competent chemist can handle the presentation." "Wait," Richard called out. "Where are you going? We need you for the investor meeting." I paused at the door, looking back at the room full of exhausted faces, my colleagues, my betrayers, my dependents. "No, Richard, you needed my formula. You've got it. What happens Monday is your problem." The rain had stopped when I reached the parking lot. Dawn was breaking over the city, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. I sat in my car for a moment, watching the light creep across the bright core building. I'd saved them, but I wasn't done, not even close. I didn't sleep that Saturday. Instead, I sat at my home office with 3 monitors glowing, diving deep into the server logs I'd quietly copied during those 6 hours of salvation. What I found made my blood run cold, then hot with rage. The timestamps told a story of systematic betrayal. 3 months ago, at 2:14 a.m., someone had accessed my original Titan X analysis and copied it. The next morning, Derek presented his concerns about the project to the board, my concerns, word for word, but twisted to make them sound like minor issues he'd already solved. The login credentials traced back to Maya Torres. Maya, 6 years we'd shared an office. 6 years of lunch breaks where she'd listened to me vent about Derek's recklessness. 6 years of me reviewing her reports, recommending her for raises, being the mentor she said she'd never had. And all that time, she'd been feeding him everything. I pulled up more files, following digital breadcrumbs through folders I'd never had access to before, folders that had mysteriously unlocked during the crisis when IT removed all restrictions. There it was, in black and white email chains between Derek, Richard, and Maya. The subject line from 2 weeks ago made my hands shake. Operation Sidelining EC. They'd planned everything. The promotion announcement was designed to keep me quiet while they finalized the transfer of my research. The dinner was meant to isolate me, to break my spirit. Maya's job was to ensure I'd be too humiliated to fight back. "She trusts me completely," she'd written. "She won't see it coming." But the conspiracy went deeper. Purchase orders showed Derek had been buying inferior materials for months, pocketing the difference. Safety reports had been falsified. Richard had been signing off on all of it, taking his cut. They weren't just stealing my work, they were setting up the company for a catastrophic failure, planning to cash out before the collapse. My phone buzzed, a text from Maya. "Elena, I'm so sorry about last night. Can we talk? I can explain everything." I stared at those words, feeling something cold and calculating take root in my chest. She wanted to explain fine. Let her think I was weak, emotional, ready to forgive. Let them all think that. I responded, tomorrow, coffee at our usual place, 3 p.m. Then I opened a new document and began typing. Not a report, a comprehensive timeline of corporate fraud, complete with evidence, every falsified document, every diverted fund, every safety violation, but I wouldn't send it yet. First, I needed more. The daylight was fading when I finally looked up from my screens. 17 hours of investigation had revealed the full scope of their corruption. This wasn't just about my career anymore. They were willing to risk lives for profit, to destroy the company's reputation for short-term gain. My laptop dinged with a calendar reminder. Monday, investor presentation, 9 a.m. They'd added me to the meeting invite, probably expecting me to present my formula as Derek's achievement. The audacity was breathtaking. I pulled up Derek's original formula, the one that had failed so spectacularly. Hidden in the metadata was something interesting, multiple versions, each one progressively more dangerous, each one ignoring more safety protocols. He'd known it would fail. They'd all known. The failure was intentional, designed to trigger a crisis that would let them restructure the company, eliminate positions, and emerge with golden parachutes while everyone else burned. But they'd made one miscalculation. They'd assumed I'd either crumble or play along. They'd never considered a third option, that I'd document everything, fix their sabotage, and then dismantle their entire scheme piece by piece. I stood up, stretched muscles cramped from hours of hunching over keyboards. Outside my window, the city lights twinkled like a constellation of possibilities. Tomorrow, I'd meet Maya, let her spin whatever story she'd concocted. I'd return to work Monday, smile at Richard, shake hands with Derek. I'd be the good soldier they expected, all while building a case that would destroy them. The plan forming in my mind wasn't about revenge, not exactly. It was about justice, served at precisely the right temperature. They'd taught me that the corporate world was a game of chess, not checkers. They just hadn't realized I'd been playing a completely different game all along. My phone lit up with another message, this time from Richard. Elena, the board is impressed with your work. They want to discuss a new position. Very lucrative. Let's talk Monday. A new position, translation a bigger cage, a fancier title to keep me quiet while they continued their pillaging. I typed back, looking forward to it. Let them think they'd won. Let them believe their money could buy my silence, my complicity, my soul. They were about to learn that some things couldn't be purchased, and some people couldn't be broken. They'd started this war, but I was going to finish it. Sunday's coffee with Maya was a masterclass in deception, hers and mine. She arrived 10 minutes late, eyes red-rimmed, designer handbag clutched like armor. I'd chosen our usual corner table, the one where we'd planned our careers, shared our dreams, built what I'd thought was friendship. Elena, I'm so glad you came. She reached for my hand. I let her take it. Counting the seconds her touch made my skin crawl. 3, 4, 5, then I gently pulled away. You said you could explain. The tears came on cue. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. Derek promised. She caught herself, dabbed at her eyes with a napkin. The divorce cleaned me out. The lawyers, the apartment, everything. Derek offered me $50,000 to keep him informed about your research. Just summaries. He said, nothing harmful. I sipped my coffee, letting silence do the work. She filled it, as liars always do. But then Richard got involved. They said if I didn't help with the transition, they'd fire me. Say I'd been stealing company secrets. I have kids. Elena, twins starting college next year. The twins were real. The rest was fiction. I'd seen her bank records during my deep dive, regular deposits from Derek dating back 2 years, long before any divorce. But I nodded, let my expression soften. I understand, I said quietly. We all do what we have to survive. Relief flooded her face. You forgive me. Water under the bridge. I even managed a small smile. We should probably keep some distance at work, though, for appearances. She agreed eagerly, too grateful to notice the small recording device in my purse, capturing every word of her confession. Monday morning, I arrived at 7:30 sharp, dressed in my best suit armor for the battle ahead. The office buzzed with nervous energy. The Japanese investors were already in the building, the presentation scheduled for 9. Richard intercepted me at the elevator. "Elena, fantastic work Friday night. The board is very impressed." "Just doing my job?" I followed him to his office, where Derek waited, uncomfortable in an expensive suit that couldn't hide his panic. "We need you to present the solution," Derek said without preamble. "The investors trust female scientists more, diversity optics and all that." The insult wrapped in opportunity, I pretended to consider. "I'll need full access to all project files. For context." They exchanged glances. Richard nodded. "Done." For the next hour, I prepared my presentation while they hovered. Anxious vultures. What they didn't notice was the second laptop in my bag, connected to the company Wi-Fi, running a program that captured every email, every file, every digital conversation flowing through their devices, all legal. The employee handbook they'd never read gave it security broad powers during crisis situations. As the designated crisis response lead, I was technically IT security today. The presentation went flawlessly. I explained the science, the solution, the timeline for implementation. The investors asked sharp questions. I answered them all, weaving in subtle mentions of team efforts and collaborative solutions that made Richard and Derek relax. "Your company is fortunate to have such talent," Mr. Takashi, the lead investor, said in perfect English. "This kind of expertise is rare." "We value all our employees," Richard replied smoothly. "Elena is a perfect example of how we nurture talent." I smiled, nodded, played the part of the grateful employee, all while my hidden laptop collected evidence of their crimes. The weeks that followed were an exercise in patience. I attended meetings, contributed to discussions, even had lunch with Richard twice. He mistook my compliance for submission, my cooperation for capitulation. The new position he'd dangled came with a 40% raise in a corner office right next to his, where he could watch me. "You're being very reasonable about all this," he said one afternoon, feet up on his desk. "I knew you were smart enough to understand how things really work." "I'm learning," I replied truthfully. Derek grew bolder, taking credit for my solution in industry publications. Maya avoided me, but I could feel her guilty glances during department meetings. The three of them thought they'd won, that their secret was safe, that I'd been successfully neutralized. They had no idea that every conversation in Richard's office was being recorded. The pen holder I'd gifted him was broadcasting everything to my personal server. They didn't know that their deleted files were being recovered by the forensic software I'd installed during my crisis access. They couldn't imagine that their victim was documenting their every crime, building a case that would destroy them all. By week 3, I had enough evidence to bury them. But I wanted more than their destruction. I wanted transformation. The company needed to be saved from itself, and that required surgical precision, not a sledgehammer. So I continued the performance, the perfect employee by day, the meticulous investigator by night. They'd created this version of me, this calculating creature who could smile while planning their downfall. They just hadn't realized that monsters, once created, rarely stay under control. The emergency all-hands meeting was called for 2 p.m. that same day. The entire company gathered in the main auditorium, 500 faces reflecting confusion, fear, and morbid curiosity. Word had already spread, Richard escorted out by security. Derek's office sealed with yellow tape. Maya's desk cleared within an hour. I sat in the front row, feeling the weight of 500 stares. Some knew I was involved. Others whispered theories. The lab technicians I'd trained looked at me with something between awe and terror. Margaret Walsh took the podium, her presence commanding immediate silence. "This morning, the board received evidence of serious misconduct involving senior leadership, effective immediately. Richard Hale and Derek Lawson have been terminated for cause. Maya Torres has been suspended pending investigation." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Someone in the back actually applauded before catching themselves. "Elena Carter will now present the evidence that brought this to light." Margaret continued. "I want everyone to understand exactly what happened here." I walked to the podium on legs that felt disconnected from my body. The microphone hummed with feedback before settling. I looked out at the sea of faces, colleagues who'd stood by while I was humiliated, subordinates who'd whispered behind my back, executives who deemed me disposable. 3 weeks ago, none of you came to my promotion celebration, I began. No preamble, no softening. You were all at Derek's fake retirement party, toasting a man who was stealing company resources and endangering lives. I clicked through the evidence methodically: financial fraud, safety violations, the conspiracy to trigger corporate restructuring, but I saved the most damaging for last: the recordings. Derek's voice boomed through the speakers. Elena's too ethical for her own good. That's why she'll never make it here. Then Richard. Scientists like her don't understand business. You feed them enough recognition to keep them producing, then harvest their work when it's ripe. Finally, Maya. The words that hurt most. She actually thinks we're friends. It's almost sad how naive she is. Brilliant with molecules, clueless with people. The room was tomb silent. I could see faces processing, calculating their own culpability. How many had laughed along, how many had known something was wrong but stayed quiet. But this isn't just about 3 people, I continued. It's about a culture that enabled them. How many of you saw Derek's shortcuts and said nothing? Noticed Richard's favoritism and shrugged? Watched Maya sabotage colleagues and decided it wasn't your problem? A hand raised in the middle section. Dr. James Park, one of the senior researchers. We were afraid. Speaking up meant becoming a target. I understand fear, I replied. But silence is complicity. Your fear let them destroy careers, endanger lives, risk everything we've built here. Another hand. Sarah from Quality Control. What happens now? Are we all under investigation? No, but things change starting today. The board has approved a complete restructuring, not the financial kind Richard planned, but ethical, anonymous reporting channels, rotating oversight committees, promotion criteria based on documented merit, not relationships. Margaret returned to the podium. The board has also created a new position, Chief Scientific Ethics Officer. Elena Carter has agreed to serve in this role, with full autonomy to investigate and veto any project that compromises our integrity. The applause started slowly, uncertainly, then built. Not everyone joined. I could see the holdouts. Richard's former allies, those who'd benefited from the old system. They'd be problems for another day. One more thing, I said, returning to the microphone. Some of you are wondering if I'm going to seek revenge against everyone who participated in that night 3 weeks ago. I'm not. But I am watching, and unlike Richard's surveillance, mine isn't secret. You'll know when you're being evaluated. You'll see the metrics you're measured against. Transparency works both ways. As people filed out, several approached me. Apologies, mostly. Promises to do better. I accepted them with professional distance. Forgiveness wasn't mine to give, but cooperation I could work with. Dr. Park lingered. That recording device in Richard's office, how long has it been there? 3 weeks. But you gifted him that pen holder 2 years ago. I smiled. I did. The recording device was added recently, during the crisis, when I had security clearance. So you planned this from that Friday night? No, I admitted. That night, I only planned to survive. But they taught me that survival isn't enough. Sometimes you have to burn down the diseased structure to save the foundation. He nodded slowly. Richard was my mentor. I thought his methods were just business. That's the problem we're fixing. The auditorium emptied except for me and the ghosts of every humiliation, every dismissed idea, every moment I'd been told to wait my turn. They'd created their own destroyer, someone who could smile through betrayal while documenting every slight. Tomorrow, the real work would begin rebuilding trust, establishing new systems, proving that ethics and excellence weren't mutually exclusive. But tonight, I had one last recording to review. I pulled out my phone, played Maya's final voicemail, left at 1:37 p.m. Elena, I know you'll never forgive me, but you should know your promotion was real. Richard meant it. The party was my idea. I wanted to hurt you because you had everything I wanted. The talent, the integrity, the respect. I'm sorry it came to this. I deleted it. Some truths weren't worth preserving. 6 months later, I stood at the head of the same boardroom where I'd destroyed them, but this time, the faces around the table were different, younger, more diverse, chosen for their expertise rather than their connections. The quarterly review meeting was about to begin. My first as Chief Scientific Ethics Officer. Project updates, I announced, pulling up the dashboard I'd designed. Green lights across the board, safety protocols followed. Budgets transparent. Timelines realistic. No corners cut, no numbers fudged. We're actually doing science again. Margaret Walsh smiled from her seat. Revenue is up 12%. Turns out, integrity is profitable. Who would have thought? I replied, allowing myself a small smile. The meeting proceeded smoothly. Each department head presented their progress, their challenges, their needs. No one inflated their successes or buried their failures. The recording devices were gone. We didn't need them anymore. Fear had been replaced by accountability, paranoia by transparency. After the meeting, I returned to my new office, not a corner suite like Richard's, but a glass-walled space in the center of the executive floor. No hiding, no secret meetings. Everything I did was visible to anyone who cared to look. A knock at my door. Doctor, Park entered with a tablet. The Titan X replacement is ready for final approval. We've run every test you specified, plus a few extra. It's bulletproof. I reviewed the data. Solid science, careful methodology, honest reporting. Approved. Good work. James? He hesitated. Can I ask you something? Do you ever regret what happened, how it went down? I considered the question. Richard was under federal investigation. His assets frozen. Derek had been blacklisted from the industry. Last I heard, he was selling insurance. Maya had relocated to another state, starting over at entry level in a different field. I regret that it was necessary, I said finally. I regret that the system was so broken it took burning it down to fix it. But regret what I did, no. You've changed, he observed. You're harder now. Not harder, clearer. I know exactly who I am and what I'm willing to do to protect what matters. He left, and I turned to face the window. The city sprawled below. Thousands of companies with their own Richards and Dereks and Mayas, their own toxic cultures disguised as corporate efficiency. I couldn't fix them all, but I'd fix this one. My phone buzzed, a LinkedIn message from someone at a rival company. Heard about your reforms at Brightcore. We have a similar situation here. Would you consider consulting? I typed back, send me the details. The revolution I'd started wasn't ending, it was spreading. Other companies wanted their own controlled burns, their own ethical restructuring. They'd seen what happened when you ignored the warning signs. Let the rot spread too deep. 5 p.m. arrived. Once, I would have stayed until midnight, trying to prove my dedication. Now I packed up at a reasonable hour, knowing my worth wasn't measured in suffering. In the elevator, I encountered several junior researchers heading home. They nodded respectfully, but without fear. One actually smiled. Have a good evening, Dr. Carter. You too. The parking garage was well lit now, another of my reforms. No more dark corners where conspiracies could breed. I walked to my car, the same sedan I'd sat in that night 3 weeks after everything fell apart, planning their destruction. But I wasn't that person anymore. That Elena had been reactive, wounded, striking back from pain. This Elena was proactive, strategic, building something better from the ashes. As I drove home, I passed Marcello's, the restaurant where I'd sat alone at that empty table. They'd remodeled. I noticed new management. Even places had moved on. My phone rang through the car speakers. Margaret Walsh. Elena, the board met privately after you left. We want to discuss succession planning. My term as lead director ends next year. You want me on the board? I want you to consider it. You've proven you can see the rot others miss. We need that perspective at the highest level. I'll think about it. That's all I ask. Oh, and Elena. That company that reached out about consulting Vitatech, we've been watching them. They need what you did here, badly. After the call ended, I smiled, not the bitter smile of revenge or the false smile of corporate politeness, but something genuine. They'd tried to break me with their betrayal. Instead, they'd forged me into something stronger, sharper, more dangerous to corruption wherever it hid. I'd walked into that empty celebration as Elena Carter, naive scientist who believed good work spoke for itself. I'd emerged as something else entirely, a force that corrupt executives would learn to fear. a name whispered in boardrooms as both warning and solution. They'd given me the greatest gift imaginable. They'd taught me that power wasn't given, it was taken, and I'd taken it all. The city lights blurred past as I headed home. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new corruptions to expose, new systems to build. But tonight, for the first time in 6 months, I felt something I hadn't expected: peace. Not forgiveness, never that, but peace. The kind that comes from knowing you've not just survived but transformed, not just won but changed the game entirely. They'd stood me up at my promotion dinner. In return, I'd stood up to an entire system. I'd say we were even, but that would be a lie. I'd won. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Drop a comment, and let's connect. If this story of corporate revenge resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts below. What would you have done in Elena's position? Your perspectives make these stories come alive.